All right, everybody, welcome to the podcast. Today we've got Sev, aka Sevrin from NON, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. Is there anything else?
Uh, think twice.
Think Twice, right?
Yeah,
Out of Japan, right?
yeah, yeah.
Crazy. Well, we'll get to that. I'm curious how you got down with that crew and then the other crews too. But yeah, thanks for coming on, and it's a pleasure to have you.
Of course, bro. My pleasure.
Yeah. Maybe to start off, for anyone who might not know who you are, do you mind just doing a little like background, how you got into the dance and how you got into maybe hip hop or whatever?
Yeah. So yeah, I'm from Surrey, BC, the Vancouver area. I started dancing super duper young, like doing like hip hop in studios. But as far as I can remember, I was always really drawn towards breaking because as a child, I just saw breaking as like the freest possible dance in my mind. Like that was the dance for me. It was like, whoa, you could do anything. You can move your whole body. You can be on the ground. You can be in the air. Um, so I was always, I guess, sort of magnetized to that, and that's what I started with like choreography hip hop. No, I was really excelling at it, but I also always really liked to freestyle, and I think because breaking to me at the time looked like the freest dance. I just really naturally gravitated towards it. Um, Even though I was so much better at like choreo hip hop and stuff as a kid, and then my parents are like, "Oh, he wants to break, okay." But yeah, I would just practice all the time and uh, met like the local scene, met NON. They started to train me. Uh, Tried to get more serious throughout like high school. Helped form my own crew, Scoundrels, and then yeah, I don't know, just kept it going
Yeah.
and trying to just be a part of the culture and stuff.
Nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
listen.
I remember like I remember the first time I saw you. Not the first time, but like early on in your, I guess, dance career. And yeah, it was like this little kid, and he had this like little cap on and these glasses and stuff, and it was like everyone could see like, oh man, this kid's like got some potential. Like he's like just starting out or whatever, but man, like he's already at this level, like, and he's just starting out. Like, yeah, it was pretty crazy. But I remember you were like, you like chopped off some. This is miming, of course, not real life, but you like chopped off some guy's head and then started like, you know, doing the
Yo,
business to it.
I have like
We were
so
like,
many. There's probably so many videos of me when I was like
yeah,
11, around that age, just like doing all like and getting really creative with it.
yeah, yeah,
I look back and I'm like now I don't I sort of knew but didn't know at the same time.
yeah.
Like it's hard
Well,
to explain the mentality
but that's
of
like
like
really common, I think. Like
yeah,
you see these gestures and stuff, and it's like, oh, you don't really like think necessarily
you don't think
too
deep
deeply
about
about
it.
it. Like it's just,
No,
oh, that's like what you do in breaking. Like you
yeah,
don't. Oh, it's called the cock or whatever. But you're not thinking like you're not envisioning like a literal dick
yeah.
in your hand or something.
You're not thinking of like the implications or
Yeah,
like
yeah, exactly.
yeah. That all came later. Now I'm like
Yeah,
I'm like PG when I battle.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
like,
Um,
that's all. That's all.
but yeah, I think everyone goes through that phase of
Yeah,
like
yeah,
you're just discovering it and you're figuring things out and stuff. And,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, totally.
Yeah. Can you talk about yeah, how like the Scoundrels formed? Is it Dirty Rotten Scoundrels or just Scoundrels?
Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. Yeah, I mean, I think it was just like I was already breaking like throughout elementary school and into high school, and I had a couple of my friends, mainly like Matt and Kendall. But I already knew we met at battles. We met at like some like notable practice spots in Surrey, like the Guildford Rec Center, or in like Newton as well. And we just really wanted to like form a crew and establish ourselves. And we were already doing like little like street shows and stuff, or like at festivals and whatnot. So honestly, like our goal was like we just want to like just try to get like all the best guys in her generation and just make a crew happen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of funny like to think about it now because like I guess when I say like that was like the original motivation, it kind of sounds really like oh like like shallow or like how people talk about super crews or not a super crew at all, but like how like we talk about like super crews these days like,
Right.
but I guess like we were so young, so everyone is still cultivating their own identities, and after you just make that link, like then like like 10 plus years of friendship just like really naturally forms. Or maybe it's more like you think about like how you would make friends when you're a kid. You're just like standing next to a kid,
Yeah.
and you're like you want to play, and then you're best friends.
Yeah.
Like it's not deeper than that. So I guess it was sort of that. It's like, oh, you break and you're good. We're brothers. We're brothers now. We're gonna
Yeah.
like battle all over the world and stuff. Um, yeah. So like that was sort of the impetus. Like just all around Surrey a little bit in Burnaby. Like a couple of the guys from my high school, Johnny and David. Well, David went to different high school. Then Matt's high school, Josh, Carl, Jay. I could, there's a whole bunch of us, and then like
Yeah.
we got like Thomas and Magnus from like Burnaby, Vancouver, and yeah, we were just really, really hungry, and like we just really, really wanted to make it past prelims. That was the fight. Actually, at the first time that like we made it past prelims, not in like a youth battle, was at the Filthy Feet anniversary.
Oh
That
man.
was like all right, oh finally we did it because we would enter every jam and like I would convince myself like finally this is the one that we're gonna be able to rep, but then it just never happened. And that day I was just I had like the right amount of like rage and passion that like I just feel like we just punched a lot harder, and then
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of cool to think about. Like there was like an event that sort of like establishes yourself in the culture, and it's like oh
Sometimes,
okay,
yeah.
yeah. I feel like if there was an event like that, it would have been yeah the Filthy Feet anniversary.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember you guys like just in general, like repping a lot and um, you know, it's always kind of like weird in Vancouver because I was talking about this with Arthur, and we were talking about like Vancouver especially has these like waves of people in the scene, and it's like a bunch of people, and then for whatever reason it kind of dies out a bit, or it's like slows down, and then a bunch of people come in, and then it comes
Yeah,
down, and like you guys were part of that sort of uh, new wave, I guess, and it was cool to see because you guys all
yeah,
came up together, right?
yeah.
Yeah, so there was a bunch of you guys. But yeah, and are you guys like is the crew still active, or is it life happens and some people drift out, but whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's both. It's
Mm.
like we haven't been thinking all too hard about like, all right, we're all gonna like get together and train for like freestyle session in
Yeah.
Japan, like it. Because yeah, like it's definitely life, but I'm just happy, honestly. Like, and I think it's really, in a way, what matters at the end of the day, that we're still able to get together and like session. And I think especially after going through COVID, like
Mm.
because Vancouver like had a really slow recovery
Oh,
with like
really?
things getting back to normal. Uh, so it felt like extra long, like
Mm.
being able to have some sort of gathering, like even just with like close friends.
Mm-hmm.
So I think with just that distance, like being able to put things into perspective, I just have more appreciation to be able to just go to practice and that be an end in itself. Because I guess before, especially like when you're like growing up in breaking and you have this like goal in mind, like where you want to be, um, it's like practice is always like a means to an end.
Mm.
And I guess now, and maybe it's also just when we get to a certain age, when you do this for so long, like you end up just realizing that like it can be an end in itself. Like it can just be a joyful experience on its own. It's not like its value doesn't come from like attaining this big
Wait.
goal in the end.
Yeah.
And that's still a great thing, obviously, but like it can also be just being able to like continue the process
Mm-hmm.
and like have this like energy exchange with your friends or whoever,
Mm-hmm.
right? So in that sense, like we're still very much like alive and thriving,
Right. Right.
even if it's like low key,
Yeah. Well, I think
yeah,
that's a good point too. Like, you know, crews crews always come and go and that kind of thing. And but a lot of times, like, yeah, especially as you get older, people have different responsibilities and different like things that come up in their lives and different priorities. But I think like a really beautiful thing about crews and breaking is like, regardless of whether you all dance still or whatever, like that is a bond that formed between people, and like that kind of stuff can last very really long. Like in our crew, a lot of us like we really slowed down, and but we still are connected in a lot of ways, and it's like it might even just be because of we were in the same crew and we both danced, but because of that we formed this bond and that kind of thing. And like it does become in some ways like I don't think the idea of like crew as a family is exists for every crew, but in a lot of ways like that kind of idea persists,
yeah,
that you don't like you're not necessarily like, oh, I'll die for them kind of thing or whatever, but it's like, yo, that's my, like you said, that's my brother. We both
yeah,
break. The guy, he was there.
yeah,
And then now we're brothers.
yeah. Hey, you had to like
Yeah.
throw yourself in the situation where you're like dance fighting for your life against some other random people.
Yeah.
They might be dissing your friend and stuff, and it's just like that energy. You
Yeah.
don't get to share that with a lot of people,
Yeah, it's
and
true.
then you have to like build to get to that point as well.
Yeah.
Like it's definitely something special. Like
Yeah.
I think it carries with you even if it goes like unsaid, or like I still feel that like level of closeness with like everyone in my crew. Like even if like time passes and we haven't seen each other for a while, like it did, right?
Mm-hmm.
Naturally with just like the last couple years.
Yeah.
But it still feels like hit hit anyone up and it wouldn't be weird, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
Um, I want to talk about this one thing that you said. I think it was in like footwork dictionary thing that you did with Charles.
Oh yeah.
and you were talking about like Vancouver style and how Vancouver doesn't have like a very distinct, specific style.
Yeah.
But because of that, it's like you don't feel pigeonholed into like conforming to a way of moving. And so in a lot of ways, it's very freeing and liberating, and you're free to explore and stuff. Can you like, yeah, just expand on that a bit more for people
Yeah,
and your thought
really.
process behind that?
That's awesome. I've actually like this year especially I started to think about that a lot more. Um oh shit, where to start? Like yeah, like so the thought I had like back in the day, that was like 4 5 years ago, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I would notice that like you go to battles and you can sometimes you can just watch someone break and you can tell like where they're from. Uh like I can see someone and be like, oh, like they're definitely from Florida, or like they're definitely from Vegas, or even like just there's certain like little styles that definitely come from like a geographic place, and you can tell. Or like there's even ways in which like breaking culture sort of like designates styles to uh, locations. Like I always think of like that Profo one video where he talks about the three like evolutions of like footwork, like New York Bronx style, and like the European style, and the Toronto footwork and threads and stuff. Um, so with all that kind of like in my head, I was trying to think like what could be like a Vancouver style, and it just became like a really challenging question for me, and I didn't know if it was because I'm from Vancouver, so like what makes what we all sort of share is like perhaps blind to me, or if it's really like from my observation, I just really couldn't like see a like I don't know, this like through line that everyone sort of shares. Like it just seemed
It's
like
overarching style kind of thing.
yeah, like there could be maybe little sort of approaches that like specific crews kind of shared. Um, but even with that, like it just felt like a lot of times people even within their crews felt very different. Uh, so it's like I couldn't really say like I feel like if I saw like a Vancouver breaker and I didn't know them or I didn't know where they're from, like I wouldn't be like, oh yeah, that's Vancouver. That's like a Vancouver. I'd have to like know they're from Vancouver first to like be able to make that claim. Um, yeah, and like I used to think, well, like kind of that's the observation. Like, how could I like internalize that to like some sort of affirmation? And back in the day, yeah, it was like, okay, then it feels like there's no sort of category that's like informing how I can dance. I can be experimental in the way that I want to be. And sometimes I almost feel like that line is very Vancouver. Like, uh, but I also like, I also like, I think this year especially, I started to think more about why does like do styles get like categorized by like geographic location? And like one thing like I thought about like why does like European style footwork happen after Bronx? Like why didn't it happen in New York with like the slides and stuff? And there's a variety of reasons, and what I'm saying is just pure speculation. But I thought like, well, maybe it's something like when New York style happened, like people were just breaking on the concrete, like just breaking on like rough floor and stuff, and then breaking hits the mainstream, and like people all over the world can see it, and then Europeans see it, and they're more encapsulated by like the power moves and the dynamics, and they elevate that, and they sort of bring that into their footwork, but also it might be something like just a terrain that they had access to. Like
Yeah.
maybe perhaps they had access to more like recreational centers or like dance studios, places that had like really smooth floor, that allowed them to like experiment more with sweeps and
Yeah, it
blah
could
blah
be.
blah. Because I think those are like very real influences on not just dance, but like ways of life that people have across the world, like the environment you're in, the weather, especially like um, I don't know,
Yeah,
multiple
it
different
could be a lot of
factors.
different things, like
Yeah,
the information that you had access to at the time, which is
yeah,
like whenever
just,
people are talking about, it used to be this way and it used to be able to pick out different styles from every area, and it was like, yeah, well, you didn't have the internet and didn't people didn't have access to the entire world, but they do now, and
yeah,
so people get inspired by everyone and anyone they see.
yeah,
And
yeah,
whereas it used to be like the people in your local area, which would kind of really isolate the ideas. And then occasionally someone would come in or someone who's like nearby had
mhm,
some influence or something. But yeah, like a lot of people that I talked to in the early days, it's like, well, how did you start? What did you learn from? And a lot of like the older generation people will be like, yeah, we had like a tape and we watched that or something like, like rarely someone would come into to their city or whatever and teach, and like people weren't there wasn't like established like jobs, like I'm a breaking teacher. There were very few, right? But it's just kind of different now, and a lot more people are teaching, be it in person or online or in public
yeah,
spaces or whatever,
yeah,
like, and just, yeah, people can see everything. People have different areas that they practice in. Some people learn at home. That'll shape the way that you learn. They have different size spaces. Yeah, I think
yeah,
it's super interesting though, that idea.
yeah, yeah, and like I guess what started to interest me was like if there's these sort of like I don't know, atmospheric influences, because even like that itself, just the way that we have access to breaking is like instant and like so global. That in and of itself shapes like the way that like styles form, even if it feels like it becomes less attached to like your like local geography.
Hmm.
But I guess my thought was like, yeah, if all these things sort of shapes of styles, like, is there a way like if you could like sort of articulate or understand these like atmospheric influences, could you then like take a hold of them and then like develop these styles like actively, or does it always happen like I guess sort of passively or like
Oh, I see
behind,
what you mean.
like it at like an unconscious level or something?
This is some deep stuff.
Yeah,
But yeah, yeah, like that's an interesting thing. It's like it's one of those. I think that's like a classic. What do you call it? Like debate, I guess. Not debate, but just something that people ponder is like sort of a nature versus nurture sort of thing. Like, is it me? Am I doing it? Am I controlling it, or is other things, outside things, controlling it and
yeah.
making me do something? Like, yeah.
Or it's like I even think like what's our attitudes towards that? Like if you discover something is more nature, like does it just have to stay like that? Like does it just have to stay something that feels like an outside influence, or
Hmm.
does knowledge of it like allow for like more active use?
Hmm.
I guess one of the ways I was thinking about Vancouver style was like just the way in which so many people train at Robson Square,
Hmm.
which definitely has a huge influence on I think everyone that uses the space,
Hmm.
because yeah, if you don't know Robson Square, it's like a ice rink in the middle of the city that they cement for like majority of the year when it becomes spring towards like the end of fall. So it's just this big concrete slab that's like really smooth, uh, but because it's like ice the rest of the year, it's still somewhat slippery, and it's like very unforgiving, like how you like dance on it. So you can't really spend too much time like bouncing on it or impacting it, or if you do,
Yeah.
you gotta be real careful. And I feel like definitely the fact that like so many of us train there has to have like some big influence on
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
everyone's style, right? Like even though for myself, like when I was training there a lot, I just made that's pretty much where I made like all my ankle move things because I could just spin like crazy, and that's when I also became very aware of like the difference of terrain. That there's certain moves that
Yeah.
like very Robson Square
Yeah,
moves,
yeah. Maybe
and they're
everyone
not
who's practiced there.
necessarily like everywhere else moves. Like
Yeah.
you gotta be aware of that.
Yeah. I think if you
Yeah,
practice at Robson long enough, you'll develop some Robson only moves. And yeah,
yeah,
you definitely gotta be aware of that. And
yeah,
yeah, I think yeah, everyone who's practiced there has that experience in some
yeah.
form or another. Um, yeah. Am I wrong in this assumption that this sort of like, way of thinking and just the way that you think about breaking is somewhat influenced, or this is just how you think and it led to your kind of like background in philosophy?
Oh
Am I
yeah,
is that what you did? That's what you did in university, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, that's what I read. I'm a big philosophy nerd. Um, it's not to say that I'm smart or anything, because I feel philosophy makes me feel really dumb, and like that I can't like just go about things like a normal person because I like too many concepts like broken down. It's more like to me, it's like philosophy is like it has less to do with having some sort of like perfect objective understanding of the world and more just about like I don't know, just cultivating ways of seeing things.
Mm.
It's like a philosophy book to me is just like a toolbox. Like
Mm.
some things will pick up and they'll be really useful. Other things will go over your head. They just won't have any use for you. I especially feel that way now because like I feel like that's all that matters in the end is like what you can do with the text versus like what is the truth of it. Um, that would be like endlessly debatable. It's more cool to see like yeah, like what comes out of it by your own like sort of creative interpretation of it. But yeah, like I kind of started to think about breaking in style and geography based off of this like idea of like geophilosophy, which was the way I understand it so far is like it's like a proto practice that's supposed to uh like focus more on like how thought systems get intertwined with like I don't know space time like geographies and stuff or the way that I understood especially is like in this chapter I was reading it was combating like this sort of like notion that philosophy was like essentially Greek because then from that can come some sort of very like I don't know like discriminatory conclusions or supremacist conclusions that like oh like Western philosophy comes from the West blah 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 whereas like if you think about Greece, it was like at the time was this place of like tremendous like import and export, and there was a lots of like cultures like all like meeting each other, and then the way that the city states they just allowed like a certain class of people to have like leisure time, and like all these things just sort of these contingent like factors just um came together at the right time for something like philosophy to emerge.
Mm.
So it's trying to think more on those lines, but in other like for me it's always with breaking.
Yeah.
It's like always like any like philosophical interest is like ultimately tied into like how can I make more cool moves.
Yeah, I feel that though.
Yeah,
Uh, and I think a lot of people, I don't know what it is, like just breaking, it catches people, and so people, people have all kinds of different interests and stuff, and they go and study those things, but a lot of times it's like, how does this relate back to breaking, which is the thing that I really like.
yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah,
but it's such a useful thing to like go and explore other things and see how those connections relate to that thing that you like. Like, for example, I've been studying stuff about like design recently, and I studied some stuff about philosophy before, and even stuff about just religion, and yeah, it was kind of like veering a bit into philosophy, and those are all kind of share like elements that are
yeah,
similar. But yeah, it was like super interesting, and it got me thinking about like, well, how do I view breaking, and it got me like into this like, yeah, I've got to like free my mind a bit more, and can't be so focused on like, oh, I've got to see it only this way, but what are the different angles that I can see it as,
yeah,
and what are the different ways that I can approach it,
yeah.
and yeah,
It's like
and not just
also
thinking
just
about moves and stuff or the culture, breaking culture. It was like, let's start digging deeper in this kind of thing.
yeah,
What are the common things that's not just breaking? It's like, how do you learn, or how do you piece together a story and stuff like that, that is not only with breaking, that's like universal, a lot of
mhm,
things that are like human in nature.
yeah. Like I guess like the way I kind of see it now is like I've over the years too. Like I also started to like explore other like movement arts and like things I never really ever saw myself doing because I think I grew up like especially as I got more serious like maybe there's somewhat of a like prevalent mindset in breaking culture that like is influenced off of like martial arts films where it's like discipline like this is like your main thing. You can do other styles but it's like don't go too crazy like because you got focus on breaking. But nevertheless like I did other styles and I had a lot of fun like exploring them, but it also felt really good to like return home, return to like a solo practice or just a place uh, where I could break, but with this sort of like new exploration or like creative practice in mind, or concepts or like ways I could move my body. Um, like to me, it's like it's just like the same thing when like you travel and then you come back home, like you see things differently. But I feel like there's like a big important thing to like return home, like to come back, like explore something. It doesn't mean you leave that thing either, but coming back and seeing how like home changes or mutates and blah blah blah. Like that's always been that's been like a joy for me that I've like sort of stumbled upon like
Yeah,
the last few years.
nice. Yeah, I think a lot of the stuff that we were just kind of talking about, it just makes me think about sort of the nature of creating and stuff like that, and like, you know, it's it's important to have like lots of different influences and things like that, and not be too restricted in like you've got to do it this way and that way if you want to like foster creativity. But at the same time, like the more I do this and just do other things, it's like it's this like delicate balancing act of like how much do you focus in, and how much do you open up to like influences or whatever, that kind of thing. And it's like it's never the same, and it's always in flux. It's like certain times you'll need to zero in, and other times you need to open up. And yeah, there's like a design philosophy, or not philosophy, like a sort of like, I don't know what you call it, but it's called this like the double diamond process or whatever. And so like through this journey of like understanding the issue, the problem, what you're trying to solve, and then zeroing in on that. So it's like you don't know anything, so you do research, and that's really open. And then you start to get a better idea of things, and then you start to narrow in on like, okay, this is the particular issue that I want to try and solve through design or whatever. And it's kind of similar with breaking in a way. But yeah, and then you narrow in on that. And then once you have that figured out, then you open up again and be like, okay, well, what are the ways that I can solve this?
Yeah.
And like, you know, breaking it might be like, okay, I want like an original style or something like that, which is really vague and whatever. But if you were gonna like solve that, you'd be like, okay, well, what are the styles that are out there? And you would start looking at stuff, and you'd look at everything, and you'd look at things now, and you'd look at things from the past, and to get a better idea. And you have to understand like what the hell is breaking, right? You got to know the box before you break, before you think outside the box, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the kind of thing that I was thinking of. It's
Yeah,
like,
no, that's funny. It makes me think like, because yeah, like I think that was like a big internal struggle for me, like over the years, learning to break and trying to make it my own practice was. I think it was actually very late in like my breaking journey that I could really like appreciate and have this drive to just like work on foundation.
mm-hmm.
I think when I
Same.
was young and like I just wanted to be creative and make more moves and find these new ways, and I always thought of foundation as like I just kind of had like a change in perspective, I guess, over time. Like before, like I would just see foundation as like having to fit these like perfected forms, which meant like I need a certain level of strength or agility or flexibility and a certain level of stamina. Um, and to me, that was like the athletic, sportsy side of breaking. And I was like a little scrawny kid, so it just didn't. It always felt like a big barrier or obstacle. But then, I guess as I just got older, like I don't know what exact experiences, but I just realized that like what foundation is just like something that gives you like it's in like the name, like it just gives you this like steady ground, like it
Mm-hmm.
gives you this like ability. I think that's what it was. It's like I was like wanting to create these certain moves, but like I knew if I just had this much foundation, like just a little bit more, then I could like explore a little bit more. But it's also like once you get this foundation, you have like a whole another level of like potential things that you can do.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It's a different thing. Like it's not like you have to like do all this work and then boom, you have this perfect
Yeah.
foundation form, right? It's like no, instead it's like you kind of cultivate this ground and it just gets sturdier and
Yeah.
better over like time and repetition, and then from there you can like
Yeah.
um,
Well, yeah, it's like
regard it. You know?
I had that like a very similar thing. I think maybe a lot of people have this sort of revelation of like, yeah, you grow up like when you get into the dance, you hear it a lot. It's like know your foundation, learn these steps, learn this, learn this. You got to know this stuff, and like it was always kind of like, oh yeah, I always approached it like, oh, I guess like, yeah, those are just moves that you have to do for it
Yeah.
to be breaking. Like, and like that, if you say it that way, it's like, oh yeah, that's what foundation is. But what didn't click in my head was that you learn these moves because they're teaching you like basic ways of moving that in from there you can then build off of. If you
Yeah.
have a good, say, six step or a good sweep or six step and a sweep, then learning something like a baby sweep or a three step or whatever is
Yeah.
easier because you have those building blocks. And if you have a good sweep, learning something like a windmill will become easier because you know how to like use your legs to create momentum or stuff like that, or like doing a swipe or whatever, you know. So it was like that kind of revelation that I didn't get until way later.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you realize like, oh man, that's why the abstract named that workshop like foundation is the key to creativity or something like that.
Yeah.
Or like I think Poe one had another one, it was just called like keys or something. And like he just teaches like foundational kind of things.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it's like it's literally in the name. If you know what that means and you think
Yeah.
about it a bit, like it's building that base that you can then build off of
Yeah.
to make
It's
things
cool.
easier.
Like it, and then it gets to a point where it's like, okay, now I can do foundation. It doesn't feel like a chore or like, I
Yeah.
would just be so like impatient as a kid, I think.
Mm.
To be like, I just want to dance to music and stuff. I mean, I still give myself so much time to do that
Hmm.
for the joy, but it's like, it doesn't feel like, oh, now I gotta, or it's like, I can feel it like as I'm doing it, like I understand like what I'm doing or what I'm building. So it feels like, it still feels like the same sort of creative path, but it's like maybe slower at like an effective level, you know. Like
Yeah.
it's not so immediate, and even I guess putting it that way, it makes sense that you don't necessarily understand it when you're younger.
Yeah.
It isn't immediate. Like you need to have, for some people, like like us, we need to have the experience to like over time to be able to be like, oh, okay, I get it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But I think even just that idea of like you don't understand this thing in the moment or something, and it's not until later. But a lot of times, like the more I think about this, the more I kind of, this is my opinion, that there isn't really like a wrong way to start. There's just starting and then continuing to reflect on what you want to do with the dance. And if you
Yeah,
keep going, you're going to realize like as long as you're doing it and you're being honest with yourself, you're going to realize like, okay, I want my dance to go this direction. And to go in that direction, I need to learn these things, or
yeah,
I've got to work on this. I'm not flexible enough to do this, but I want to do that. I want to do this thing, or I want to have this style. I want to move this way. So to do that, I need to work on my flexibility. Or like, let's say someone started with power, like that. This idea of like foundation is like only these moves is maybe it's good to an extent because it helps define like what the realm, the thing that you're working within. But at the same time, it's like if someone starts with learning air flares and 90s and things like that, that's going to be the basis of their style. Like if you look
yeah,
at a guy like Ruin, he used to be like only power and he couldn't do footwork. His footwork was like god awful and his freezes were pretty ugly too, in my opinion, when he was younger. But you see
I
him
don't
now, or like
know.
as he got older and he started to incorporate some of that other stuff, it just added and it made
Yeah.
whatever he was already doing that much better. And same thing with like Wicket was the same. He started out with just power and doing that, and then he learned this foundation and how to mix the things together, and like it just made it that much better.
Yeah.
And there's other people who went I think Bourne was even like that too. He started out as a powerhead. Focus was a powerhead at the beginning. But yeah, and there's other people who went the other way. And like I kind of don't think, as long as you're active and like learning about the culture and being honest with your areas that you can improve on, or that you want to improve on, and where you want to go with your dance, all these things, like it kind of almost doesn't matter.
Yeah. At the end of the day, yeah, I don't like. Yeah, there's no like correct way to start.
When everyone's like end goal is different too, right?
Yeah.
So it'll depend on that too.
Yeah. I think yeah, like I try to like the way I put things in perspective now is just like really what matters in like a creative process is the middle. So it's like you don't have to get too worked up about how you start, and like the end is just some sort of horizon to like make sense of being in the middle of things. And if you can make the being in the middle of things like joyful and like affirming, then like that's like the main goal, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Enjoying the process.
Yeah, it's that cliche term of like enjoy the journey. It's the journey, not the whatever. But yeah, I think with a lot of those things, they exist. Those sayings exist for a reason, but because they get said so much, people don't really think about it. But if you really start thinking about, well, why does that exist? Like, what does that actually mean?
Well, I think you gotta like go through something to like because you just hear these cliches, like they can just be like empty signifiers that don't really apply to your life, but you have to sort of like discover it and like
we learn a lot by doing, right?
Yeah
Experiencing and doing. That's one big thing that like I think a lot of like younger people doing anything, but like said, let's say in breaking, they'll be like, yeah, how do I like find my style, or like how did you get your style and stuff like that. And like maybe sometimes people cultivated it, but I'd say like more often than not, people didn't necessarily like, I want to break exactly like this. It was like they liked someone, they gravitated towards something, but it was like over time, through their experiences and their influences and the things that they did, the places they went, the area that they live in, the ground that they have to work with, these all influenced it and helped create their style.
You just try something out, you like it or you don't. It's like style. I think developing a style for me it's like looking back, it felt very like fractal, it's like just these like little events in my life that like I would just take in these little things here and there, and then eventually, right? And it's also like I think what a lot of people are like maybe afraid to admit, but like I think when you're first developing your style, you just go through a long stage of like mimicry. I just think it's unavoidable now, especially just how prevalent like you see images and videos of breaking. Like of course you're going to break like people that you admire, because they inspire you to break. So like I think that's why like I think it was really important for me like when I started, because I was still like small, and I convinced myself like I couldn't be like super strong with stuff, so like I needed to see like b-boys and b-girls that could like still like express themselves at, I don't know, not necessarily a high caliber, but like with a level of explosiveness by other means, like by musicality or just cleverness in their moves and stuff.
Hmm.
So like I used to watch like so much Born when I started, and Casper, uh, and like Kid David too a little bit later, and like very much so like went through phases like kind of dance like those guys, and then you become reflective, and then you change, or you take on other things. Um, yeah, it's something that like it's weird. Like I do feel like I had like an active process in developing my style, but it's also a lot of things. Like, but I think that active process is very like small. It's
Mm.
like
Yeah.
I'm gonna incorporate this move, or like I like messing with these gestures, and then you can't really picture
Mm.
like in your head, or let alone articulate it in words, like how that's going to affect everything. You know,
Yeah.
like I think sometimes your choices you can be aware of are very, or like at a smaller scale, but then they all like
Mm.
contribute. Yeah,
Yeah. It's like kind of following what you just like and you're interested in, and then
yeah,
will just naturally guide you into certain directions and stuff. I don't know. Maybe this is also like a personality thing that certain people, are are just think about it fundamentally different from others, and other people are more just like, oh yeah, just kind of follow my whims and what I'm interested in. Other people are very like, okay, I've got to learn this and then that and then that and then that, more like analytical about it or something. And I don't know, that'll create a different style too.
yeah, yeah. And I think in both those cases, more often than not, you can tell that that's how it is from how they end up breaking.
Mm.
You know, or like I actually found like a lot of like the moves that I ended up like doing that have become like signatures, like straight up just started as like jokes. Like
Yeah.
they're just like stuff you do at practice to like kind of like get a laugh or reaction, and then I like not expect it. Like I just thought I was being funny, but then it ended up being like, "Whoa, that was actually clever." And then I was like, "Okay, I'll do it.
Yeah.
I'll just do it at the next jam." And then it's like, "Oh, it read really well, so now it's like a signature move, but it
Yeah.
just straight up just started as like a joke. Like I have so many moves that
Yeah.
are just
Yeah.
jokes."
But that's like an important thing. Like, I
Yeah,
don't know. If you study about like design and stuff, like that's part of the process when you're like in the sort of iteration phase of like, or creation phase. Part of that is like just looking at how, okay, you have some problem that you want to solve. Okay, just come up with ideas. It doesn't matter if they're good or bad. It doesn't matter. That's not the point. The point is to come up with a ton of them, and then afterwards you like can start to pick and choose. But the point is like at the beginning you just let things flow, and like no idea is bad. And a lot of times like I've had the same thing too, where stuff like that the force thread that I do is like literally started as a joke because I saw people clowning people on like missing threads, and then we were messing around at practice and like, what if you intentionally did this? And then it started to look like, Star Wars stuff, and like, oh yeah, we'll just use the force and like guide our foot around and stuff like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Like a lot of stuff will start about jokes. But like I think that's a good point to make though. For some people they need to hear that. It's like not everything has to start out as like this cool thing or whatever. Like it doesn't
yeah,
have to be dope from the beginning.
yeah. Or it's like
It's being
I think
playful, right?
there's like also like a, I don't know. Sometimes there's a misconception like, or that every like I feel like it's almost never true that like I fully conceptualized a move or a movement or I did it. Like it all just came from like messing around
Mm-hmm.
and like being like, okay, I'll do this and I'll just put my arm here while I turn, just see what sort of happens. Or it's like I'll do a thread, but I'll keep the movement going, and then it's like, oh, I end up in this weird position.
Yeah.
But it was never. It's pretty much, at least for me, like I can't think of a single moment where like I was just sitting at practice, like, and then just like a full set appeared in my head,
Yeah.
and then I just did it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's
Well,
always
yeah.
just like within the movement itself, like
Mm-hmm.
getting into the flow of things, being in the
Yeah.
middle. Like that's where everything comes.
Yeah. Well, like that's the idea too. That's like the second part too. So once you have these ideas, it's like now you have a bunch of potential ideas. Some of them are interesting, so try them out and see what works. Like actually test it, actually try it out, see
Yeah,
what works, what doesn't. Make little tweaks, and then you have version 2.0, version 3.0 of this thing, and like over time it evolves.
yeah,
And I'm sure you have the same thing, but like you have a combo that started out a certain way, and like 10 years later it's completely different, but it's sort of from the same combo, or that combo evolved into like some very different ending or something like that. Yeah.
yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Maybe the last thing we can talk about today is just getting maybe your current thoughts on just the scene in general, the community in general, like breaking in general,
Yeah.
as someone who's not not a new generation, but like not an old, an old guy in the scene.
I'm also in the middle. Yeah, middle ground. Yeah, yeah. That was so weird about like COVID because I felt like right before it happened, I still felt like I was still kind of like one of the young guys. Like people, I'm wearing a jam, like still like some older heads active and like not too many like way younger people. And then it's like COVID, and then jams start happening again, and then I'm like, oh fuck, I'm one of the old guys here. I'm like,
It kind of
what
happens
the hell
eventually.
happened? I thought it was gonna be gradual, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
It like tripped me out.
yeah.
Um, the
Yeah, it
thoughts on
happens.
like,
Yeah, happens quick in
yeah,
breaking too.
yeah, yeah. This happens in life, I guess. Eh?
Yeah, yeah. You're still young
But
though, to me.
yeah, I'm 19. Uh, for those watching,
Yeah.
no, the thoughts on like the current state of breaking, or like
Yeah, just like what you think of things now, or where you think things are gonna go, or
mhm,
that kind of thing.
like breaking in the Olympics.
Up to you.
Yeah,
Is that where you see
yeah.
the future
I
of
think
breaking going?
yeah, yeah. Uh, I think it's dope. Um, I'm so excited to see like um, I don't know, just like how they like. I'm really excited just to see like kids just get super into breaking and just get so inspired because like that's what happened to me. And like when I first saw breakers, like especially when I first saw breakers live, I was like, these people are like superheroes. Like
Hmm.
one of my favorite superhero comics as a kid was not like an actual comic, it was like an anthology, and it just showed like different comic book covers, so
Oh,
I could
really?
just see like all these different superheroes and then sort of just imagine their like powers or whatever. uh and like it was just like everyone was unique, but everyone had this like expression of like strength and blah blah blah. And then when I first saw Break, and I think just those two sort of images collided,
Hmm.
um, and I was like, oh, I want to be like that. But like I'm just really excited to see like what I hope would just be like a surge of interest. And I understand like like the other side of the debate. Not to say that there's just two sides where people are like, oh, like it's the sportsification of an art form or blah blah blah. And I think it's always good to like still hold concerns and be like critically aware of things, especially with something huge like the Olympics, because like any any like big institution, if they get their hands on their culture, they're gonna mess it up somehow, but in whatever way. But I also feel like that you can't fight the phenomenon itself because in many ways, it's just inevitable. Like, like eventually, someone's going to discover that this is like an eye-catching like art form that nowadays, especially, goes viral and draws a lot of attention and like the attention economy or whatever. Uh, so it's better to just think like, I don't know, how can we make use of it? Or like another thought I had is like, if just like you can maybe there'll be like an image of breaking that's very like I don't know, like whatever your someone's worst fears are, like, oh, it's just now breaking is just all power moves. Oh no, right? Like, but I also feel like with that, like there's still gonna be like that sort of undercurrent, like that subterranean level of the culture that will also expand and thrive almost in response to like whatever this new mainstream image might be, um, or it might be more like intertwined than we can anticipate. But whatever it is, I think it's good. Uh, I'm really excited. Um, yeah, and I'm also excited for like breaking to become like less like male dominant or like you know like so in like such a like, not to say that every environment is like that, but in general like dude bro
Uh,
uh,
like a very
or like
testosterone heavy kind
yeah,
of thing.
like I'm just excited for breaking to be just a more like I don't know, like relaxed in
if
terms of that.
if I had to say, coming back full circle to the Vancouver style, that's one thing that I would say Vancouver does well is it's very laid back and
Yeah,
like, yeah, we're breaking or whatever, but let's just have fun and
yeah,
like,
yeah. Oh
yeah,
yeah, 100%. And I also feel like it's just because like I know like way back in the day, like when I first like was watching like live breaking, but I wasn't that was like there was still like fire between crews
hmm
and people and stuff. I just think nowadays like it would just be like sort of I don't know, it wouldn't feel right to like replicate that at the same level of intensity, at least amongst like Vancouverites, because we all like know each other. We all
yeah.
go to the same practice spots. We're all friends. Like
Well,
so, it just seems more real to like be a bit more chill. You know,
yeah,
doesn't say there can't be like burns and stuff, but like
yeah,
nothing. No one gets like you know hurt to the core or anything
yeah.
like
Well, I think
anymore.
there's a difference too between like, um, like hate fueled stuff and just sort of like aggressive or intense kind of movement. Like, you can have people be friends, but when it's a battle or something like that, you're not necessarily like going fuck you, that kind of thing, and it's real, or you're faking it, but you can have like intense aggressive movement without it being like hateful or anything like that,
Yeah,
which I
yeah,
think is it's a because it's to me that's like however you want to think about it, like, but breaking started in like an area that was not like super like hey let's peace and love and this kind of thing, and like
yeah,
people didn't have a lot of stuff, so and there was
yeah.
they
It's
want to
like
show some way of
a lot
I'm
of
the king or the queen of this place, I'm the best,
a
that kind of
a
thing.
lot of times, like the things that you could actually have were like your moves, right? Like
Yeah,
that's what
right.
you created. That's what you could say for yourself. That's what
Yeah.
like no one could take from you. So then when someone did take from you and they're biting, like then it was like extremely serious.
Mm.
And, like like I understand that like when it's coming from there. And I guess just like with Vancouverites, it just like it wouldn't make sense. You know? Like it wouldn't
Yeah.
make sense. For,
Yeah.
like if someone been my moves, I would be like yeah, in a bow, I might still do that, but I wouldn't be like kidding.
Check
Like,
my move, this mother. Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
especially nowadays where it's probably like you probably just made it and like didn't even know that I existed,
Yeah.
right?
Probably. Yeah.
Like just how pervasive everything is, right?
Yeah. True. True. Well, I think that's a good spot to finish up here. Um, it was cool getting your insight in a lot of these things. You're a very deep thinker and a very insightful dude. I hope people listening and watching either you got something out of it or at least it made you think about what you're doing and that kind of stuff. So yeah, thanks for sharing that, Sevrin.
Thanks for having me here.
Yeah. Yeah. If you have any sort of last little shout outs or anything like that before we close off.
Yeah, shout out Scoundrels, I don't think twice, Vancouverites. Uh, uh, if I know you, shout out.
That's the best one.
Right? Uh, like, yeah, you can follow me on Instagram for People's Tyrant. Uh, I don't know. Yeah.
You want to spell that out for people who are just
Oh,
listening?
yeah. So it's the and then People's Peoples Tyrant Tyrant.
You
And
win
I
the spelling bee.
upload very occasionally, but I'm
Nice.
there. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
All right.
I want to try to upload more. I have some like just silly ideas that I want to make a thing. I don't want to spoil, but you know, I want to start like I think like during COVID, I started to like, oh, these algorithms are like they're like demons. Like they're so bad, and they're making
Yeah.
me they're making me like not be able to like read books anymore.
Mm.
Uh, but now I'm like, wait, I shouldn't just let these things defeat me. I should overcome them. You
Nice.
know, again using those tools. So like, I don't know. I might start doing stuff. Is what I'm saying.
Cool.
But,
Well, if you
yeah.
follow him, you got some stuff to potentially look forward to. But anyway, yeah. Thank you, Severin. Thank you, everyone who's watching and listening. Really appreciate it. Yeah, appreciate Severin you taking the time to do this. Yeah, and we'll see you all in the next one. All right. Peace.
Peace.